Tonight at 10, Buckingham Palace announces that King Charles has been diagnosed with cancer. It was discovered during tests when the King was being treated in hospital last week for an enlarged prostate. Senior royals, in particular Prince William, are to carry out the King's public duties while he undergoes treatment. Prince Harry has spoken to his father and is to fly to the UK to be with him in the coming days.
And tonight, the King is staying overnight in London after his first day of cancer treatment. Buckingham Palace say he is feeling positive and looking forward to returning to royal duty.
Our other top stories tonight. A new image of the man suspected of carrying out a corrosive chemical attack on a woman and her daughters. Police still don't know his whereabouts.
Don't tell him, Pike. Pike!
And Private Pike, otherwise known as Ian Lavender from the much-loved Dad's Army, has died aged 77.
And on BBC London, we hear from the daughter of a Londoner killed in a dog attack in Essex, who says her death could have been prevented.
Good evening. King Charles has been diagnosed with cancer. Buckingham Palace made the announcement earlier this evening, saying that while the King was in hospital being treated for an enlarged prostate, tests revealed he also has cancer, though the palace is not saying what kind. The King won't be performing his usual duties in public for now, though he will carry out state business and paperwork as usual. The statement adds the King is wholly positive about his treatment and looks forward to returning to full duties as soon as possible. Other members of the royal family are expected to fill the breach, in particular Prince William and Queen Camilla. Prince Harry is due to fly to the UK to see his father in the coming days. Our royal correspondent Daniela Ralph is at Buckingham Palace for this evening. Daniela.
Well, Fiona, the King is staying overnight in London after his first day of cancer treatment. The news of his diagnosis came as a real shock both to the King himself, but also to the wider royal family, many of whom will now have to step up as the monarch steps back from royal duty. There was little sign yesterday of the announcement about to be made. The King was pictured on his Sandringham estate in Norfolk, walking to church with Queen Camilla. He was thought to be recuperating after a hospital stay. Exactly a week ago today, the King left a private hospital in central London, where he'd spent 3 nights being treated for an enlarged prostate. We now know during his stay here, cancer was discovered. In a statement released at 6 o'clock this evening, Buckingham Palace said, during the King's recent hospital procedure for benign prostate enlargement, a separate issue of concern was noted. Subsequent diagnostic tests have identified a form of cancer. He remains wholly positive about his treatment and looks forward to returning to full public duty as soon as possible. Although open about his diagnosis, Buckingham Palace says the form of cancer the King has will be kept private, as will the nature of his treatment. All of his public engagements have been cancelled. Last week, the Queen was asked how her husband was recovering from his prostate condition during a visit to a new cancer support centre at a North London hospital.
How's the boss doing?
She said he was doing his best. The King's condition means royal duties will have to be picked up elsewhere, with the Prince of Wales and others taking on some of the King's engagements. Prince William himself has been away from royal duty for 3 weeks, following his wife's stay in hospital after surgery. He returns to work this Wednesday.
I think there will be a team effort. I think Queen Camilla is central to this. I think the Princess Royal too, absolutely crucial. And I think the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh will be stepping up. So yes, it's a slimmed down monarchy, but it's a team, and it will have to regroup and adapt.
The King will have a visitor this week too. It's understood the Duke of Sussex will be travelling to the UK from his home in California to see his father, who contacted him personally with news of his diagnosis. It is the first time Prince Harry has seen the King since the coronation. This is a testing time for the King and the wider royal family, as they balance personal, private challenges, with the need to continue with public duties. Daniela Ralph, BBC News, Buckingham Palace.
In the past, British monarchs have tended not to share the diagnosis of any serious illness with the public. Any constitutional issues that have arisen have been discussed behind closed doors. King Charles has broken with that tradition, but made it clear he intends to continue working on affairs of state as much as possible. Here's our royal correspondent, Nicholas Witchell.
He's 75 years old, and like anyone receiving a diagnosis of cancer, irrespective of their position, he's having to deal with a sharp reminder of his own mortality. In terms of his constitutional role as head of state, not just of the United Kingdom, but of 14 other nations as well, that is unaffected, so long as he is not physically incapacitated, and there is no suggestion of that. Though it appears he will disappear from public view, he will continue to deal with the red boxes, the state papers which come to him every day. There are a multitude of documents, from parliamentary bills to a host of other things, which require his attention and his signature. If he were to become incapacitated, then other members of the royal family would step forward as councillors of state. His wife, his siblings, and his sons are all councillors of state, but there's an acceptance that neither Andrew or the absent Harry could be seen to perform such a role.
There to welcome His Majesty as
a notable example of when councillors of state were required occurred in the early 1950s. Charles's grandfather, King George VI, had been diagnosed with lung cancer. He underwent an operation at Buckingham Palace to remove one lung. Other members of the family, including his wife, could have fulfilled his constitutional role while he was incapacitated. However, there is nothing to suggest such an arrangement will be required in Charles's case.
If things changed, then a decision would have to be made for councillors of state to be appointed, and the king would have to sign the letters patent, effectively springing the councillors of state into life, and two of the councillors of state would need to act, effectively deputising for the king.
So for King Charles, a fit 75-year-old who's generally coped with life with resilience and humour, there is now the challenge of dealing with the levelling impact of cancer. Though the prognosis appears to be good, it will be a considerable and often solitary test. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Well, it's a week since the King left hospital after undergoing a procedure for an enlarged prostate. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, is outside the London clinic where Charles had his treatment. And Fergus, this is where doctors diagnosed the King's cancer.
That's right, Fiona. The King spent 3 nights here, and it was during that time that he had diagnostic tests that picked up the cancer. The palace is not saying what form of cancer the King has. We know only that it's not prostate cancer, nor are they saying how early it was caught. Both of those vital factors in assessing just how serious the outcomes can be. And clearly the palace does not want to invite speculation. They've said that he began today a series of scheduled regular treatments for that cancer, and he's being treated as an outpatient, and most cancer therapy these days is given as outpatient therapy. Most commonly things like chemotherapy, drug treatment to kill cancer cells, and radiotherapy. Chemotherapy, of course, so many different forms. It can be given most normally as an infusion into a vein in the arm, but also in the form of tablets, and sometimes direct into the cancer, the affected organ itself. All of those things, of course, come with side effects, but that varies on the type of treatment. Age, of course, is the #1 risk factor for most cancers. The King is 75, and just over a third of all cancers diagnosed are in people aged 75 and over. The King is one of around 1,000 people a day in the UK who are diagnosed with cancer, and senior doctors have praised him tonight for mentioning his cancer and highlighting the indiscriminate nature of this disease.
Fergus, outside the London clinic, thank you. And there have been many messages and good wishes from political leaders here and abroad, wishing the King a speedy recovery. Our political editor, Chris Mason, is in Belfast. Chris.
Fiona, when you examine the wiring of the British state, the core connection exists between monarch and government, between Buckingham Palace and Westminster. And while we'll be seeing less of the King in the coming weeks and months as he undergoes his treatment in public, our understanding is he will continue with his private work, that state-based work that Nick was referring to a few minutes ago. So he'll still receive those red boxes, that daily paperwork that arrives and flows between the palace and Westminster, and he will still continue with his weekly audiences with the Prime Minister. And our understanding is that they will still be face-to-face unless the doctors working with the King were to advise him that perhaps he should limit in-person contact, how many people he's seeing face-to-face. As you might expect, politicians around the world and around the UK have been sending their best wishes. The Prime Minister, the Labour leader, other party leaders, and also the First Ministers of Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. And the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, offered these reflections in the Chamber a few hours ago.
I wish to make a short statement. I know the whole House will wish to join me in expressing our sympathies with His Majesty the King following the news announcement this evening. Our thoughts are, of course, with His Majesty and his family, and with all wish to send him our very best wishes for the successful treatment and a speedy recovery following tonight's news.
And reaction as well from political leaders around the world, among them the Prime Ministers of Australia and of Canada, and indeed from President Biden in the United States, who told reporters, "I'm concerned about him. I've just heard about his diagnosis. I'll be talking to him, God willing."
Chris, thank you very much. And we'll be hearing a little bit more from you in Belfast later on in the programme about the return of the Northern Ireland Executive at Stormont. Now, let's take a look at our other main stories today. And police investigating the attack using a corrosive chemical in South London say they've arrested a 22-year-old man on suspicion of assisting an offender. Officers are still looking for Abdul Shakur Azedi following the attack on a woman and her 2 young daughters last Wednesday. Our Home Editor, Mark Easton, has the latest.
A new picture of the Afghan refugee who fled the scene of the Clapham corrosive chemical attack 5 days ago. Abdul Shakur Azedi identified on London's Southwark Bridge at 9:50 on Wednesday night. But since then, nothing. Azedi's car, recovered from the scene, has been minutely examined by a forensics team. Inside the vehicle, officers found Azedi's mobile phone. But while that helps provide evidence, it also means police are much more reliant on CCTV footage to track their target's movements.
It takes a long time to track CCTV because, you have to work out which way he's gone. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of CCTV painstakingly gone through. We've got support and assistance from our counter-terrorism fugitive teams who are experts in this, along with our experts in specialist crime. So we are tracking him down and we will continue to do so.
Will you get him?
I'm as confident as I can be, Mark, that we will, yes.
Police are trying to work out the relationship between Azedi and the woman he attacked. She suffered serious burns from a powerful corrosive alkali. Still critically ill in hospital, unable to communicate, she has life-changing injuries to her face and is at risk of losing sight in her right eye. The 2 children are now out of hospital and being cared for. But the trail of their attacker has gone cold.
In one of the most surveilled cities in the world, a man with a serious facial injury whose picture's been all over the media and apparently without access to a mobile phone or cash, well, he simply vanished.
A 22-year-old's been arrested on suspicion of helping Azedi evade capture, but the Met Specialist Manhunt team says if he's alive and being supported, it could be some time before they finally get their man. Mark Easton, BBC News, Scotland Yard.
Rishi Sunak and the Taoiseach of the Irish Republic, Leo Varadkar, have visited Stormont to mark the return of power sharing in Northern Ireland. They met the First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, and Deputy First Minister, Emma Little-Pengelly. Mr Sunak said the return of the Assembly was a cause for optimism, but ministers in Northern Ireland are calling for urgent talks about long-term funding for public services. From Belfast, here's again our political editor, Chris Mason.
The pleasantries are routine, but this is something we have never seen before.
a British Prime Minister greeting a nationalist First Minister of Northern Ireland. The Deputy First Minister and Northern Ireland Secretary there too. Rishi Sunak was here to see Northern Ireland's new executive.
Today isn't the end, it's the beginning, and actually the real work starts now.
And this was a day of two Prime Ministers, not just one. The Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, had swapped Dublin for Belfast.
Really glad to be here today. There are various times over the past year or two where I didn't think this day would happen.
From a round table to a classroom table.
You guys munch into that, all right.
The Prime Minister went next to a primary school just outside Belfast. He wants to emphasise day-to-day stuff on this trip, not just highfalutin politics. He dispensed snacks.
Who wants a cracker?
And took questions.
What would your advice be for going into big school next year?
Oh, wow. Okay, what would my advice be? First of all, I would be excited about it. Are you excited?
Yeah.
Yeah? I'd be excited.
Prime Minister, this must be a moment of pride. I guess one of the biggest achievements of your time as Prime Minister, getting devolution up and running again here.
Well, lots of people thought that this wouldn't ever be possible, so actually I think it's an enormous cause for optimism that we've got to this place.
Northern Ireland's health service is widely seen as in crisis, and many schools are struggling for funding. Prime Minister, you've met the First Minister this morning. We've met her as well, and they're talking about money, aren't they, people at Stuttgart? We'll just play you a little clip of the First Minister's conversation with us.
This place isn't funded properly. As a local executive, the Tories for over 12 years now have starved our public services of much.
They're sending you £3 billion, aren't they?
I know, but that doesn't even make up for the money that they've robbed from the public services.
Clearly they're saying they want more. Are you saying that's it? Look, you've got a lot of money and that's it?
Obviously, there's always conversations that can happen between the Treasury and the Executive. Look, that's right and proper. Of course, those conversations
so maybe
will happen. Yeah, but those are always processes and conversations that happen.
The new First Minister has also talked about her belief that within 10 years there could be a referendum on Northern Ireland's future, and she would hope a united Ireland. What would you say to that?
Well, I'm a proud unionist, but I also
Do you think the union's secure?
Well, I deeply respect that whilst I'm a proud unionist, that not everyone shares that view.
A nationalist on the left, a unionist on the right. The First and Deputy First Ministers have equal legal powers.
Em and I stand in front of you today as First and Deputy First Minister. We are trying to do our best to get to grips with some of these issues that we have.
That's what the public expect of us. They want us to do our best to fix our public services and to create a sustainable future for Northern Ireland.
So, devolved government begins again. An assembly, an executive and an expectant public wanting its politicians to deliver. Chris Mason, BBC News in Belfast.
The government has published its Disability Action Plan with 32 measures it says will make the UK the most accessible place in the world for disabled people to live and work. Parts of the plan have been welcomed by charities, but there are concerns that the government has abandoned some of its previous commitments. Nikki Fox has more.
Yeah, we like it. I'm not quite sure how much I like it.
This isn't just any playground. It's a brand new, fully accessible, inclusive playground in North London. With funding from Barnet Council, mums Natalie and Deborah also raised money to get this project off the ground. And Deborah knows just how hard it is to find these kinds of places for young people like her son Zach.
To be sitting here now with it existing, and I can come now when I'm thinking at the weekends, what am I going to do with him? I can come to the park here. It's a joy, and to see other people in the same way happily coming in, children of all abilities playing together. It's a marvellous thing, and sadly, this shouldn't be a marvellous thing. This just should be.
Where would you like to go?
For Winnie, it opens up a whole new world.
We could get Winnie's mainstream kindergarten friends and her disability playgroup friends all together and have them all play here for a birthday party for her, and no problems.
It's playgrounds like this the government wants to see more of in today's Disability Action Plan.
It really will matter in disabled people's daily lives, but it is one pillar of a huge body of work which will make sure this country is the best place to be a disabled person.
Here in Hertfordshire, the Purple All-Stars are practising their next routine. This group of people with learning disabilities are passionate about helping others understand how to look after their health. And it's important because people with a learning disability are more likely to die from avoidable causes.
Access by doctors or look after my health.
They know what they want the action plan to tackle.
We can be equal and together in our community.
Get myself a job. I need to try and build more confidence in myself, to try and deal with public.
Working out how much we've got to spend and how much is coming in and how much is coming out.
I just want everyone to be inclusive and look at us differently, you know, like we are like anyone else.
These are just some of the issues why charities want to see a more drastic plan.
For disabled people who are going through a lot of challenges at the moment, whether that's a cost of living crisis, difficulties in employment, crippling social care charges, we wanted to see something a bit more transformational.
The government says it wants to tackle the barriers that prevent people from getting on in life. And today, Labour has announced plans which will ensure equal pay for disabled people. Nikki Fox, BBC News.
The US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has arrived in Saudi Arabia on his 5th visit to the Middle East since the attack by Hamas on Israel and the subsequent war in Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry says nearly 27,500 people have been killed in Gaza in the nearly 4 months of conflict. Our correspondent Lucy Williamson has been looking into the story of one 6-year-old girl who fled the fighting in Gaza City with her uncle's family. She was last heard from in a desperate call to the emergency services. I should warn you, you may find some of Lucy's report distressing.
Alone and under fire, 6-year-old Hind Rajab called for help. Surrounded by the bodies of her relatives, she begged paramedics and her mother to come and get her. They tried. A week on, Hind's mother still doesn't know what happened to her daughter. The ambulance sent to rescue her is missing too. She waits every day at a nearby hospital, hoping her daughter will be brought in.
Every time I hear the sound of an ambulance, I think maybe it's her. Every sound, every gunshot, every falling missile, every bomb. I wonder if it's heading for my daughter, if she is being hit.
Hind was in a car with her uncle's family as they fled the fighting in Gaza City. At the Faraz petrol station, their car appears to have come under fire. Hind's cousin Layan told the Palestinian Red Crescent that she and Hind were the only ones left alive.
الو مرحبا. ايوه بضخوا علينا. الدبابه جنبي. انتم متخبيين؟ في السياره احنا جنبينا الدبابه. انتم جوا السياره؟
The call ended with heavy gunfire. When operators called back, it was Hind who answered.
قريب كتير؟ كتير. وعم تمشي؟
It took several hours for Israel's army to allow an ambulance to reach Hind, trapped inside an active combat zone. Hours that operator Rana stayed talking to Hind on the phone.
She kept saying, "Come and get me. If you can't come," she said, "send someone else." She even asked me how far my house was. It shows how she was holding on to hope, the last hope of us talking to her. It was very painful for us.
As the ambulance approached the area, all connections were lost. Since then, there's been no sign of Hind or the paramedics who went to save her. We asked the Israeli army for information. They said they were checking. Hidden somewhere in Gaza is the unfinished story of 6-year-old Hind Rajab, waiting for the fighting to end. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Rishi Sunak has declined to give his backing to calls by the mother of the murdered teenager, Brianna Ghey, for under-16s not to have mobile phones that can access social media apps. Esther Ghey is also campaigning for any online searches of inappropriate material to be flagged to parents. The Prime Minister said tough new powers were already in force under online safety legislation. Angus Crawford reports.
Funny, witty and fearless is how Brianna was seen by her family.
Scarlett,
You are under arrest.
But for Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe, here being arrested, she was a target. And, Jenkinson fed by extreme online content, they used messaging apps to plan her murder.
It's such a simple solution, and
Brianna's mother wants a change in the law.
So if you're over 16, you can have an adult phone, but then under the age of 16, you can have a children's phone, which will not have all of the social media apps that are out there now, and also to have software that's automatically downloaded on a parent's phone, which links the children's phone, and it can highlight keywords. So if a child is searching the kind of words that Scarlett and Eddie were searching, it would then flag up on the adult on the parent's phone.
Brianna's murder has terrible echoes. Breck Bednar, just 14, killed by a man he met online gaming. Ollie Stevens, stabbed to death by children who shared fantasies about knives and killing on social media. At the heart of this issue, a conflict between parents like Brianna's mother wanting to know more about what children are doing and seeing online, and the power of the tech companies chasing the exclusive clicks of young users. In the middle, the government trying to find a balance between the two.
Bye, guys!
Today, while visiting Belfast, Rishi Sunak said Parliament had already taken action.
Regulator now has tough new powers to control what is exposed to children online, and if the big social media companies don't comply with that, the regulator is able to levy very significant fines on them.
The Online Safety Bill does complete.
The Online Safety Act, years in the making, now law. The tech companies must have systems to protect children from harmful content and robust age verification. But we're still waiting for the regulator Ofcom to finalise its powers. Also in the pipeline, government guidance on banning mobile phones in English schools. New laws, future bans, offer hope for parents, but come too late for Brianna and her family. Angus Crawford, BBC News.
Women's football is enjoying a surge in popularity, but the Chelsea manager Emma Hayes says the low number of female coaches is a big issue. As one of only 4 female managers in the Women's Super League, she wants to see more creative ways of encouraging them into the professional game. Emma Hayes has been speaking to our sports editor, Dan Rowan.
She's one of the most successful coaches in world football, but after a trophy-laden decade in charge of champions Chelsea women, manager Emma Hayes is heading stateside at the end of the season. She told me just how much it would mean to bow out with even more silverware.
It'd be incredible. I think to keep winning like we have done for so many years is, you know, a real challenge in itself, but to do it in the backdrop knowing that there's change coming at the end of the year would be a real credit and a testament to the players.
Despite a surge in playing numbers in recent years, Hayes is one of only 4 female coaches in the Women's Super League and one of just 21 across the country with a pro licence. She's also an ambassador for Fun Football, a programme tackling underrepresentation in the sport.
I think it's a massive issue. I think we've got a lot of work to do to close that gap. The cost of it as a starting point, it's about £10,000 to do a pro licence, and the wages in the women's game are, you know, insignificant compared to the men's game. Most importantly, getting clubs to be in position so that they have minimum standards in place to hire women into the game, albeit at assistant coach or head coaching level. But doing that is a challenge.
4 times World Cup winners, the US national women's team underperformed in last year's tournament and have turned to Hayes, making the Londoner the game's highest paid female coach. And her first major tournament in the new job will be this summer's Paris Olympics.
Can you believe what lies in front of you?
No, but I will. Of course, I'll be excited. It'll be a massive, proud moment for me and my family. And, you know, come the summer, I'm sure I'll pinch myself a few times because it's the stuff that dreams are made of.
And with Hayes set to become one of the highest profile coaches in US sport, there's no shortage of inspiration for women hoping to follow in her footsteps. Dan Rowan, BBC News.
Ian Lavender, the actor best known for playing Private Pike in Dad's Army, has died at the age of 77. The much-loved and long-running comedy series about the Home Guard during World War II was a huge success for the BBC in the late 60s and much of the 70s. Ian Lavender was the last surviving regular cast member. Our arts correspondent David Silito looks back at his life.
Who do you think you are kidding, Mr. Hitler?
And over the next 9 years, he helped create a comedy classic that was still being shown more than 40 years later. After his years with the Warmington-on-Sea Home Guard, he appeared in comedies such as Yes Minister, as well as roles in film and theatre and Albert Square.
What you need is to relax.
Stupid boy. You stupid boy.
But even decades later, fans would still call out,
"You stupid boy."
The old catchphrase.
See? Just a moment.
Whistle while you work. Hitler is at work. He's half army, so's his army. Whistle while you...
Your name will also go on the list. What is it? Don't tell him, Pike. Pike.
Ian Lavender, the last member of the famous platoon.
Let's go back now to our top story. The announcement that the King has been diagnosed with cancer. We can speak to our royal correspondent once more, Daniela Relf, who's outside Buckingham Palace. And this is both a very personal challenge for the royal family, Daniela, but also a public one, in the sense that they will need to fulfil the King's public role in the coming weeks or months.
Yes, that's right, Fiona. There's no getting away from the fact that this is going to be a hugely challenging time, as you say, both privately for the royal family, but also in terms of how they manage the public side of their life. The bottom line is that we are not going to be seeing the King in public probably for a number of months before he's even anything closely back to full duties. He has cleared all of his diary for now in order to understandably focus on his cancer treatment. So it leaves others having to pick up some of his work. For his wife, the Queen Camilla, she already has her own programme of royal engagements and projects, but we can expect to see her picking up some of her husband's duties. And his son too, the Prince of Wales. Prince William hasn't actually done any royal duties since the 11th of January because he has been focused on supporting his wife, the Princess of Wales, who herself spent 2 weeks in hospital recovering after abdominal surgery. But Prince William is back on royal duty this week. He has 2 engagements this Wednesday where we're expecting to see and perhaps hear from him as well at engagements in both Windsor and in London. But both Prince William and Queen Camilla will have to be supported by others, the likes of the Princess Royal, Princess Anne and Edward and Sophie, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, in terms of picking up some of the King's work. Now, in terms of the King himself, I think Buckingham Palace have told us as much as we're going to hear about his condition. Do not expect to hear more from them on what kind of cancer the King has or what treatment he is having. They, at this stage, are wanting to keep all of that private.
Daniela at Buckingham Palace, thank you. Right, let's take a look at the weather now. Louise Lear is here. Hi, Louise.
Hi there, Fiona. Good evening, everybody. Another day of relentless rain in the far north of Scotland. In fact, some parts of the Highlands have already seen half a month's worth of rain, and it's only for a few days into February. Now, that rain is slipping its way steadily southwards, brightening up tomorrow with some clearer skies, but it does mean a chilly old start. And so with those showers, fairly icy in the far northeast first thing in the morning. That cloud and rain will be pushing its way out of Northern Ireland and gradually into northern England. Now, to the south of that, it'll be a relatively mild start, but you can see where that colder air is sitting in the far north of Scotland. So, yes, it will be icy, but it will be bright. A touch of light frost first thing in the morning. That weather front sinks its way steadily south and east. It brings quite a lot of rain with it, grinds to a halt across the Bristol Channel towards the Humber, and anywhere south and east of that will be cloudy, breezy, but milder. We're looking around 12 or 13 degrees, 7 to 9 underneath the cloud and the rain, but noticeably colder with that Arctic air starting to dig in. Now, that weather front will continue to sink its way steadily southwards, and that will bring a crisper, brighter day on Wednesday. Sunshine for some wintry showers into the far northwest. The weather front not really clearing the far southwest. Here we'll keep double figures, but generally those temperatures perhaps just a little bit below the average for the time of year. But that weather front in the southwest, well, it wants to push its way steadily northwards, and as it bumps into that cold colder Arctic air on the leading edge for a time, we could see some snow. So there is an early warning that's been issued by the Met Office for Thursday. For most of Thursday into the early hours of Friday, we could see some snow, even at lower levels. At the moment, current thoughts are across Wales, the Midlands and northern England. Could be subject to change. We'll firm up on the details as we get closer to Thursday. Fiona.
Louise, thanks very much. And that is the BBC News at 10. On BBC One, it's time to join our colleagues for the news where you are. From us all here, bye-bye.